So welcome everybody. My name is Jody King and I'm with the Alaska PTAC. So today's topic, we're going to go over the source information where the article came from. We're going to talk about what is a debrief. We're going to talk about the 4 phases of the debriefing process flow, timeliness and scheduling, content, strategies, and then of course we're going to have summary and conclusion. So this is a rather compact topic this morning, so we really do have quite a bit of time built in for questions. So again, at any point in time, if you have questions, feel free to drop in. I will be pausing about every other slide just to verify that I'm not missing any of the chat features. So moving forward. So source information, and this is one of the attachments that I have added in the document segment on your GoToMeeting panel. And this morning's topic is based on an article by James Phillips Jr. that was published in the NCMA magazine June of 2018. So even though a year old, it's still really valid information. And also there's a lot of references for the FAR acquisition, for the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or the FAR. And of course, I've attached the link for where you can go in and pull the article and of course the FAR regulations as well. So what is a debrief? In a contract management context, a debriefing is an explanation given by buyer personnel to offeror detailing its reasons its offer was unsuccessful. And of course, that's pulled from the article, which again pulls that from that NCMA contract management body of knowledge. But really what it is a special form of communication that allows the agency to interact with the offeror to let them know how did they do on the proposal. Most of the terminology in the FAR is for the unsuccessful offer, but I do want to point out, and I most likely will say it again, that a debrief can be done if you are an unsuccessful or successful offer, and we'll kind of talk about that more a little later. But again, it's that special form of communication that can provide valuable information to allow you to improve future opportunities through stronger, better targeted proposal documents. So again, for the government, specifically that debrief allows the agencies to conduct business with integrity and fairness. It allows the agency to demonstrate its openness to the public to help improve trust and promotes competition. And there at the bottom of the screen is the law that mandated the requirement for a debrief. And then of course it's codified in Title 48 in the FAR. For the contractor, the primary purpose of a debrief is to help you understand your proposal weaknesses and or strengths. And even if you are the unsuccessful offeror and not the apparent awardee, there were still possible strengths as well as weaknesses. And we want to have those discussions, not just to focus on the weakness, but to also talk about where were the proposal strengths. So what factors or deficiencies or omissions led to exclusion from award? And what components did lead to the award? Where were the favorable comments, additions that helped you connect with the evaluation team? The goal is to have stronger future proposals. And this is probably going to be reiterated several times throughout this morning's webinar, because really that is that purpose. And it also helps us build better relationships with the agency for which we just submitted a proposal. And we kind of forget about that marketing aspect of it as well. But anytime that we can get FaceTime or one-on-one time to really discuss our offerings, our businesses directly with the contracting staff is a great opportunity to strengthen those agency relationships and further communications. It may not make an immediate difference for the current proposal scenario, but it's going to help you with all future relationships. And anytime that we can open that communication channel, we want to take advantage of it and build those relationships with the agencies. So here's the debrief process flow. So as the article outlines, there's 4 phases of the debrief process flow. 1 is the decision, 2 is notification, 3 is request, and 4 is the actual debrief. So let's talk about these little breakdown sessions. So what is the debrief trigger? So within FAR references, it notes that the trigger is initiated by the contracting officer making a determination on who the apparent awardee is. If, in addition to determining the apparent awardee, in the instance where we might have more complex solicitation process or a more complex, I'm sorry, not there's so much the process, but the complex solicitation, the contractor officer may make a determination to eliminate some bidders from the, and I keep blanking this phrase, the competitive range. I don't know why I have such a mental block on that, but I really do. So if we look at the language in a solicitation, there is a clause that's going to state roughly that specifically in the negotiated contract process, negotiated solicitation process, that the contracting officer may have discussions or may not award without having discussions. And what we mean by that having discussions is after going through and doing the evaluation, they may determine which of the proposals are within what they call the competitive range. And those in the competitive range, so say if there were 9 received bids, they may pick the top 3 that are within that competitive range, and they may enter what they consider that discussion process, where they meet with each of the individual bidders that are in that competitive range and discuss and offer another opportunity to provide your best and final. The discussions may have just a single round or many rounds, or if the solicitation is simple enough and the award information clear enough and the apparent awardee distinguished enough, there's not such a tight competitive range, the contracting officer may go ahead and make an award without discussion. Therefore, there's no need for that competitive range. But either way, whether they decide to go directly to an award without holding discussion, or if they're going to go through hold discussions and determine a competitive range, and in that case, they're going to notify those bidders that had supplied a proposal that they are not within the competitive range. So either way, however the agency is going to go about that, that decision has been made by the contracting officer with that source selection committee, and that triggers the entire debrief process. So note that this is the starting point for all debriefing initiatives. Upon that determination, we have step 2, which is the notification. So this is where the contracting officer then is going to notify the interested parties that an awardee has been made or the elimination from the competitive range. Notice also provides instruction for requesting a debrief. And here's the tricky part, that third bulletin, notification may be done by individual letters to the offeror, or it may be posted on FedBizOpps. So if we found the solicitation on an electronic posting service other than FedBizOpps, so if there was a notice on FedBizOpps and you clicked the link and it took you to a site such as Fed Connect or the Army Acquisition Services, it took you to another, they should still have the posting on that website where the solicitation was housed, but there should also follow through and be the award notice on FedBizOpps. Now, in the case of posting the award notice on FedBizOpps, oftentimes you might not receive an individual communication, and even though the FAR says letter, that's also going to include those email notifications from the contracting officer determining who was the awardee. In this case, where it is a posted opportunity, the responsibility for the timeliness for receipt of notification is completely up to the contracting officer. Completely up to the business itself, up to the offeror. Now, just a real side note, I want to talk about FedBizOpps for a moment. If you haven't been following kind of the contracting news of what's going on, come November 8th, FedBizOpps new site is going to be launched under the Beta SAM application. So if anybody's following this, Beta SAM is going to be basically it's SAM registration, the System for Award Management, but it's going to have more websites included with access point as you log into your SAM registration. So when the Beta SAM goes live for the SAM registration, it's not going to impact any of you that have a SAM registration or active SAM registration. Your login.gov is still the same login point for the Beta SAM website. Not sure that was supposed to go live in regards to the SAM application this summer, but we've had a few delays. However, come November 8th, if you log into the Beta SAM, and again, it's the exact same login process that you're using for the SAM site now, the new FedBizOpps software should be available. Once that's launched, they are going to close down the old site. So there might be a little bit of challenge finding that. Just typing in fbo.gov and going to that site. Once they close the old one, you might have to access it through the Beta SAM site as well. The benefit of the new FedBizOpps, the part I'm really looking forward to, is it is an all new build. It's not just buffing up the old data management. It is all new software. It's supposed to have a much stronger search mechanism, much more Google-like search, keyword ranges, and it's supposed to also help with the archive process where it's going to be storing all the posted documents. One of the other things, and why it's critical for this discussion this morning, is there's going to be a better tie-in from the solicitation notice to the award notice. Occasionally, if you are following an opportunity on FedBizOpps and you've clicked on Watch This Opportunity, that communication link is broken with the posting of the award notice. If you notice, the solicitation has a specific ID, and it might have an R or a P for request for a quote, or Q, or P for proposal, and then once the award is made, then that letter changes to contract, where you see the C. So when that identifying number changes to reflect the contract number, sometimes in the old current FedBizOpps system, that communication string is lost. So you really do have to pay attention that if the contracting officer isn't sending out individual communication to all offerers, you are responsible for watching for that award notice to be posted on FedBizOpps so that the timeline for requesting that debrief is caught. Questions? It's kind of a long roundabout discussion for a single slide. All right, let's keep moving forward. So just one last thing. Throughout these next few slides, wherever we had language within the FAR, for an example, I added it to the box here so we can kind of see the language in which this is all based. So here we have FAR 14503, where it says the contracting officer shall promptly notify the offeror of the basis of the determination and that a revision of the proposal will not be considered. And revision of the proposal is again referring to that language of whether there will be a competitive range and if the contracting officer wants to enter discussions in with those businesses that were within the competitive range. Notification clauses. So there's a couple of different, and I want to pull out the language. And the reason I want to take the time to do this is because it's very important when you are still pulling your solicitation together that you understand whether it's under the FAR Part 12, which is the commercial, FAR Part 13, where we can see here is the simplified acquisition procedures, as we can see here, or here, this FAR Part 8, if we're looking at the federal supply schedules on this notification. The language is still the same, but it varies enough that it's important to pay attention and understand while you're in that solicitation phase, so that if you have any questions regarding this, you are catching that within that question time period. But here under the simplified acquisition procedure under FAR Part 13, it says for acquisitions that do not exceed simplified acquisition threshold, and in case you haven't been following that threshold, sorry, drawing with a mouse is challenging, has been raised to 250,000. It was 150. That threshold has now been, and it's updated in the FAR that it's the 250,000. So that do not exceed, for which automatic notification is not provided through an electronic commerce method that employs widespread electronic public notice, such as FedBizOpps, notification to unsuccessful suppliers shall be given only if requested or required. All right, let me get rid of all my scribbles here. So, when the previous slide, pointer, we said here, notification may be done by individual letters to offerors or posting award notice. We may have the case on here all right, move this forward. There we go. If based on FAR 13-106, and this is where it's very important to look at the language in the solicitation so that you are not caught unaware of the notification process. So quite simply here, we have it stated, notification to unsuccessful suppliers shall be given only if requested or required. The challenge for you all then is the timeline that often happens for the contracting officer to even have gone through the evaluations. Depending on the complexity, there may be a full source selection committee. If there's a heavy technical component with the evaluation, these things take time, or if it's a simpler supply contractor, it's just the contracting officer's review in time. But depending what's going on that with that individual's workload, we often have long delays from bid due date to that notification of award. This often leaves us in that, do I call the contracting officer or not? And if we look and we see this FAR 13.1063, C through D, we have here, it says only notification only given if requested. So this is when we need to develop a strategy, some sort of calendaring system, in which we reach out to the contracting officer. So in other words, how soon and how often should you be reaching to the contracting officer? A lot of times delays are triggered by purely workload, the availability at the time for the contracting officer. If they have quite a few solicitations with all similar bid due dates and that workload piles up. Very common occurrence with bid evaluations is the evaluations are done and the government estimate fell short of what the bidders were providing, and before award can even go through, the contracting officers going back to that requisition group and saying, we need more funds. And solicitations often can be tied up for that particular reason, while they're waiting for the availability of more funds before they even go further. And often if there's any delays behind the scene, there really is zero communication to the interested parties that, okay, we are trying to resolve things behind the scene. Official award, official determination has yet to be made. And keep a look at if this is a case where maybe the obligated monies in that purchase requisition is insufficient based on award data. There's also that review of the government estimate. Where did the government estimate fall short? And a look at the solicitation itself. Was the solicitation unclear in what it was communicating, and therefore all of the bids came in at a much higher dollar amount than what the government estimate had anticipated. So sometimes there's a lot of determination behind the fact, or if there was even sufficient bids for the contracting officer to work with that requisitioning group to make a determination. So delays. So this ties us back to when should we start hounding, especially if we have this clause that's clearly putting that requirement for notification back on the offeror. So I generally suggest giving it at least a week to 10 days on a bid due date and start with an email. Click the little read notice, delivery notice, read notice, and say, hey, I put a bid in on solicitation number and title. And I also encourage you to put that solicitation number and title in your subject line of the email and ask if an evaluation deadline or if the agency has made a determination for award, or if they're still working on it, do they have an anticipated time period when the award is going to be announced? I have talked to a lot of businesses in my years working here where we've been 30 days plus out waiting for notification, and the contracting officer that was tied to that solicitation seems to be suddenly AWOL and not available, and we are just not getting responses. If you run into that circumstance, you're welcome to get a hold of PTAC. Let us check for you behind the scenes. We can talk about other ways to reach out to other contracting staff. I was working with one gentleman who had a solicitation, and within the solicitation, it noted that anyone reaching out to the contracting office to ask about the award status would be deemed non-responsive and removed from the competitive range. So nothing like being told in unique terms that don't bother us, we'll let you know when we get around to it, and leaving everyone in that world of limbo. Kind of a frustrating process. But when you see, and the reason I wanted to bring that particular example up is when you see language like that, or you're not seeing vague, how do we know when the award is going to be announced, you want to bring those questions up during that solicitation phase prior to the bid due date and get that on record, which is the best way. If the solicitation is missing a clause or isn't directly telling you when will notification be issued, because the timing of this is really critical. All right, enough of my soapbox. Let's go ahead and move forward. Any questions, anyone? Okay, I don't see any hands raised or questions in the attendee box. Let me just quick check my chat box. Okay, perfect. Moving forward. All right. Step 3, request. So this is the one step that is not triggered by the contracting officer. This is initiated by the offeror. Sometimes you'll see the language where they're saying offeror, and sometimes you're going to say where the language is the interested party. Definition of interested party includes the prime contractor that submitted the bid, and it also includes your subcontractors that have a component of their proposal that they've joined for the prime. Those are all considered interested parties. However, in the realm of debrief, if you are a subcontractor and you want to hear why the prime didn't obtain the award, I suggest talking to the prime to see if they've done that debrief and if they'll share the information or invite you to the discussion, especially if you were heavily involved in that debrief, or I'm sorry, heavily involved in the proposal team putting that together. For pure relationship between you and your sub, I don't necessarily recommend jumping over the prime and asking for a debrief directly from the solicitation. So again, language in the clauses can vary between that phrase offeror or interested party. So, request. Follow the written instructions provided in the notification. Now keep in mind, if you are given an email, there's a very specific form that the agencies will use, and a lot of agencies have their best practices for award notification and language that states to request a debrief, here are the steps that you need to do, here's the reminder of the time frame. But if you do just have where your notification was based on a posted award announcement on FedBizOpps, then go back to that solicitation, look at the clause for notification, and make sure that there wasn't language already built into the solicitation on how to request a debrief. Bullet 3, submit a written request back to the contracting officer within the timely standard provided in the notification. So this is a little vague. Most of the FAR clauses that I was reviewing will state you have 3 days from receiving notice. So if there is notice provided by the contracting officer, if you received an email or a letter post-bid due date letting you know that the awardee is going to for debrief, if the agency has given you a more generous time, then you can use that information. If not, I would say best practice is to try to get your debrief requests within 3 days of receipt of notice. Anything to do in the contracting arena, those time frames and those time start points are very specific. When we're looking on FedBizOpps and we have an award announcement, we can see the date and the time in which that announcement was posted. The clock is going to start for your 3-day countdown from that posted date for that award. All right, let me talk about a little bit of pre-award and post-award terminology. When you see language that says pre-award bidding, this ties back to whether the contracting officer has determined that there will be a competitive range and discussions where they may enter into discussions. Post-award is when the award announcement has been made. It doesn't necessarily mean that the award has been executed, but the post-award, that the award has been published, the apparent awardee, and notification given to everyone. Here's who we intend to award. So when we are in that pre-award versus post-award, and we receive a letter stating that our bid is no longer in the competitive range, you have the opportunity to decide, do you want a pre-award debrief or a post-award debrief? And I believe I have more information on that, but the time frame in that pre-award, mostly it's going to, for what you can glean from overall decision information, pre-award briefing is going to be much more specific to your solicitation or to your proposal package, and not so much of comparison for what data they can compare to the final awardee. Post-award, there's more information. There may be more information on the standing determination against the overall offers involved in the solicitation. But what I'd like to note, whether this is pre-award or post-award, you only have one opportunity for debriefing. So if you are in a much more complex proposal, then the agency has determined that they're going to enter discussions and that there is a competitive range. And they can even have a competitive range in more than one phase where they go through, again, depending on the complexity and this need for discussions, they might have 3 or 4 cycles of competitive range. So pay attention. You only get, once you request that debriefing anywhere in that award process, you have one shot. Okay, talking about here, we have FAR 15506A, for example, an offer upon its written request by the agency, upon its written request received by the agency within 3 days after the date in which that offer has received notification of contract award in accordance with, shall be debriefed and furnish the basis for selection, decision, and contract award. So there are multiple clauses. This is just a great example where I wanted to show you the language. In most cases, 3 days is that standard language. It would be good habit to, in your mind, note up award notification. I have a 3-day window in which to request that debrief. All right, written request. And this isn't so much FAR language, but this is where PTAC experience is going to kind of kick in that written request. And here's a great example. How you request that debrief is really critical into or towards the type of debrief that you may be given. Now, a lot of individuals feel that they do the debrief because there's the potential protest, and they want to use the debrief as a fishing expedition to try to pull out those little tidbits of the evaluation determination process to see if there is room or justification for a protest. And with that in mind, with that being the number one reason that you are requesting a protest, you start a rather adversary shadowed relationship. Most contracting offices, contracting agencies are protest wary. They are concerned that after they have made that contract announcement, that anybody that's going to talk to them that wasn't the apparent awardee is only talking to them because they're going to file a protest. And there is that hesitation to meet an open communication with that offer because there is going to be this aggressive adversarial attitude. And often what that creates is this atmosphere and this agency policy of keeping the debrief at arm's length, where you will just receive a letter, or we will just have a very short notification, or maybe they'll talk to you over the phone, or maybe the debriefs get pushed off. And so when we do that initial request, we want to be positive, we want to be friendly, and we want to remember that, as I have in this stated in this example, that our end goal is to strengthen future submittals by receiving evaluation notes and comments on any proposal deficiencies, as well as our proposal strengths. This is critical too. We want to let the agency know that we are not coming as this with a bone to pick within that adversarial looking for a fight, but truly our goal to have that debrief is to simply better our communication, better our understanding, and to, again, strengthen future submittals. And if we keep that in a very positive, open, the agency is going to be more likely to sit down and do a face-to-face debrief with you, because there isn't that underlying concern that you're going to submit a protest and delay contract execution and delay performance. So we want to be positive. We want to watch our language. And even if your intent is there's confusion and uncertainty, if the evaluation criteria was done correctly and why that individual was awarded, and that individual not being you, we want to make sure that we are being open and friendly in that request. Questions on that? When I very first started in the government contracting arena with a business whose sole client was government agency, they had very little commercial work at all and were almost exclusively government. Within my first week on the job, I was set to draft a debrief request. And the conversation that I had with that experienced contract administrator, and again, this is on the business side of the house, is keep it friendly, use open language, really want to be hopeful, and gosh, that's sad we didn't get it. Where were our weaknesses? And by playing that much more open communication, they really did have a much higher success rate of having a one-to-one debrief with the contracting officer. It's a great lesson learned for me. All right, enough of that. Let me move forward. Okay, timeliness and scheduling. So clause here, and I pulled this right off the acquisition.gov website, or you could go to the FAR site, the Hill FAR site. I always want to say hillsite.far. Farsite.hill. I always confuse that. But here's the language here that I want to pull together. An offer upon its written receipt, received by the agency within 3 days, and I underline that here. And 2, for timeliness upon the contracting officer receiving your notification. Number 2, here we have A2, to the maximum extent practical, the debriefing should occur within 5 days after receipt of the written request. Now, so this is where that best effort kind of falls on the contracting officer to the maximum extent practicable. So if the contracting officer has time, they can schedule that immediately. There is reasons for the contracting officer that if there is concern about evaluation criteria, especially if the bid proposal range was very, very close, it is to the contracting officers to get those discussions and keep that openness and transparency with the public clear, keep that relationship, hold that sooner rather than later. However, if it is simply not going to happen based on whatever is going on for that contracting officer's workload, those debriefs can be pushed beyond that 5 days of receipt. But it's good for you all to know that, understand that there is that timeliness as outlined in the FAR for the contracting officer to try to hold those debriefs. Offerors that request a post-award debriefing in lieu of a pre-award or whose debriefing was delayed for compelling reasons beyond contract award should also be debriefed within this time period. So again, that talks about if there was entering discussions in competitive range. 3, an offeror that was notified from exclusion for competition but failed to submit a timely request is not entitled to a debriefing. Note, if you miss your 3-way window and that excuse of I wasn't notified or I didn't receive notice or I simply didn't know if the notification was posted on FedBizOps with the date and timestamp right there on that notification beginning that time limitation, not knowing is not an excuse for not being entitled. So again, if you do not submit a timely request, you are not necessarily entitled to a briefing. Number 4 kind of throws the oil in that, what is that? There's a fly in the ointment. Untimely debriefing requests may be accommodated. So again, if for any reason you've missed that 3-day window and you really do want to have that debrief opportunity, this is where your letter should be that much more friendly. Acknowledge possibly that yes, we did miss the delay. However, we really do want to work with you in the future. Please find time to meet with us to discuss our proposal. So keep that language in there and keep that accommodation because you want to encourage that opportunity to meet with the contracting officer. Okay, questions, moving on. Debriefing. Number 4, so this is the actual act itself. The contracting officer responds to the timely request by scheduling a debriefing as soon as practicable, following a method the contracting officer deems most appropriate. And this is also falling back to where you might see the unwritten policy or practice by an agency, especially if you have a group that is really protest shy of how they are going to meet with you. And as notated in FAR 15506B, the contracting officer, the debriefing can be done face-to-face, over the telephone, or via letter. Depending on the complexity, if it was simply a low price technically acceptable, in that case, maybe the letter response is you simply weren't the lowest bidder, or there was concerns of technical acceptance for your proposal. It's something very simple, a letter may be sufficient. If you receive a debrief letter and it was a much more complex proposal, you can follow up and communicate with the contracting officer and try to extend the debriefing information or ask questions about the response, even if you can schedule a phone call. But at a minimum, a letter is deemed sufficient to meet the debrief requirement as outlined in the FAR. Debrief content, right back here, FAR, what can the agency discuss with you? So here, the agency's evaluation of significant, weak, or deficient factors. Overall, grab my spotlight, so significant or weak deficient factors, overall evaluated cost or price and technical rating of the successful and the debrief offer, as well as past performance information on the debriefed. So these might be evaluation criteria. Past performance could possibly have been negative or insufficient, however that evaluation criteria. So this is where understanding that evaluation criteria is really important for number 2, for the information that you may receive. Number 3, the overall ranking of the offers when any ranking was developed by the agency. In a sealed bidding, we have the synopsis where each one of the offers is ranked based on price, usually from lowest to highest. And we can see that our apparent awardee in that sealed bidding based on the synopsis was the price. Generally, the practice, there is some sort of information that the contracting officer is pulling together, ranking the offering, synopsizing the bid results, the evaluation results for purposes of justification for award, and adding that to their contract documentation. But if the contracting officer does that, they may determine if they're going to share that synopsis or not. So that one's a little funny sometimes, trying to find out the overall ranking of the offers. Number 4 is summary or rationale for award. And 5, acquisitions of commercial items, the make, model, the item to be delivered by the successful offer. So the award notice generally, if posted on FedBizOpps, usually says the name, the contact information for the awardee, the award amount, and the contract award number. It usually doesn't necessarily go into details. So depending on the type, if it's a supply by, again, acquisition of commercial items, it might just tell you what product you can request that information as well. Number 6, reasonable responses to relevant questions posted by the debriefed offer as to whether source selection procedures set forth in the solicitation, applicable regulations, and other applicable authorities were followed by the agency. Reasonable responses to relevant questions. So it's not a one-way discussion where they're going to say, here's how we ranked you, thank you, go away. There is that opportunity for questions and further discussion. Please note that a debrief does not include point-by-point comparisons of the debrief offers proposals with those of other offers. Moreover, the debriefing shall not reveal any information prohibited from disclosure or exempt from release under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. such as trade secrets, privileged or confidential manufacturing, commercial financial information, names of individuals providing reference information, and an official summary of the debriefing. Up in 4, this is also last, but here we go, 1 through 4. This is the information E through 4 that is not available and is not to be given to you. So something to keep in mind, and the reason I want to bring this up is 1, don't expect it, but 2, be careful in your proposal that if it is a heavily technical driven proposal, that you are notating in the proposal language that restricts the release of said proposal for public consumption, such as this information is to be used for proposal purposes only, not to be released to company. There's usually, this is where you can talk to an attorney. There's usually a 1-line sentence that you can add to the bottom in the footer for your technical proposals to note that this is company property and not to be released. Questions, anyone? All right, moving forward. Debrief strategies, and we just have a few slides left, so hang in there for the last few minutes. 1, be prepared for your debrief. Evaluate your award information against your proposed cost. Now that you know that this is the awarded amount, if it seems ridiculously low, maybe we want to ask, is this the awarded for the entire base year, or in the case of the agency, maybe it's a partial award. Those do happen where maybe they're going to just award for the first 3 quarters or the first phase or the first initial while they wait for additional funds. Often an agency would prefer to award when they can fully award the first base year, but I have seen partial awards initiated. And they're not going to note that on the award notice and award amount. It's just going to have the amount. It's not going to tell you if it's a full award for the base year or a partial award. So if you're seeing really extreme cost discrepancy between your price and the awardee's price, keep that in mind, and that might be a good question. Was that a full, was the award for the full base year? 2, who's the awardee? Do a quick SWOT analysis of the firm. How do they compare against your company? Know some of the strength, weakness, opportunity, threat, SWOT, that your competitor had. What advantage may they have had? And maybe that can help you in that proposal deficiency concept. That 1, did they have a stronger proposal? Did they have a stronger team? What made them the more desirable based on evaluation criteria than yours? So having a little bit of a background check on the awardee, comparing them against your firm, might help you better strategize as to which questions you want to ask. Review your proposal, prepare a list of questions for the debrief team. Have those typed up and written and go in, give the contracting officer a copy of those questions that you would really like to discuss. Again, you're showing that openness of this is we really want to improve for future. Review the evaluation criteria. Do you have a concern on the application of the evaluation process? Do you feel that possibly the agency awarded and they didn't necessarily determine the award based on how they stated? Did they evaluate the way they said they were going to in that solicitation process? Quick review that, know that, refresh that before going into your debrief. And again, what is your end goal for that debrief? And are you truly fishing for protest fodder, or are you genuinely looking for information to further strengthen and better target your solicitations for future opportunities? All right, down to the last little tail end here, summary and conclusion. Again, this is the most important thing I hope you guys leave with today. Debriefing is a valuable tool, and when used properly, will help an unsuccessful offer improve its better proposal for future opportunities. Again, was it your terminology? Was it your language? Did you simply not give enough? Was there vagueness? Was the agency having a hard time understanding what you were offering? Did you miss a critical component? If there was an ask for key personnel and you didn't provide enough where they felt confident that you had the right personnel. Again, what were those weaknesses? Provides an openness and provides agency openness and helps to strengthen public confidence. Again, that the agency is following through and evaluating these bids in accordance with the evaluation criteria set forth. It's a great way to solidify a relationship with a government entity. Again, any type of face time where you can get where they can better understand you, you can better understand them, the stronger your proposals are going to be in the future. As a prime, share debrief information with your entire proposal team, including those first tier subs. And if you had a heavily dependent prime sub relationship, does it make sense to bring those subs that were involved in building your proposal and bring them to the debrief with you? And if you're going to do that, clearly delineate who's going to ask what questions and lead what discussions, again, to that you make sure that you have that impression of being a seamless teamed relationship going into that debrief. And be sure to include the debrief process in your proposal practices and timelines. Be aware of when is notice. When does that 3-day start? Can the contracting officer get back to you within 5 days? If you're in a competitive range or have been knocked out of competitive range, do you want to do a pre-award or wait for post-award for that evaluation criteria and to get that overall debrief information? This is it for me today. While I have the last few minutes of your time, any questions on any of the process flow for debrief? Quick recap, we have decision, the contracting officer makes a determination. We've decided we are going to award 2. Notification is issued, whether it's posted or emailed out. And now the timeline falls on the offeror to make the request. If yes, the debrief is scheduled. If the offeror decide no, we're not going to request a debrief, that's it. Communication is over. Once that 3-day window closes, even if you change your mind, you may have lost that opportunity to even sit down and have a debrief. Keep that all in mind. And last but not least, thank you for joining me today for our October Wednesday webinar. Next month, November 6th, we are going to do a webinar on procurement forecasts and really go through, show you how to find them, what are they, how to use them, where to pull that information. The registration link is open if you are interested. Yeah, it closes the day before, so it'll close on the afternoon of the 5th. Hope to see you all then. And last but not least, don't forget to take a look at our Facebook posting. And should you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or any one of us. Let us know what questions you have regarding, or if you want to even discuss more on the debrief process prior to going in. Danny, I see that you have a question. Let me open that question window. All right. Thanks, Danny. Just a comment, no questions. So last call for questions before I let you all go. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. You have my email contact information. Don't forget to download the documents from the little document link on the GoToMeeting dashboard. Review the article. There was a lot of additional information provided in the article that I've attached that I did not necessarily read. A lot more information on the timeliness on pre-award, a lot more listing of clauses and information that I decided not to go over this morning. So feel free to take a look at that article. And you guys have a great afternoon. At this point in time, I see one other up. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar. I will see you guys next month, Wednesday, November 6th.